Hello, hello, everyone. We are here. We're on. I'm so excited to be here tonight. It's going to be a great conversation. If you are, we're going to wait a second to see if anybody hops on. A lot of times I get people watching the replay. So if you are here and you're watching the replay, thank you so much for joining us on Inside Voice. We have a real treat today. I am super excited. We actually have been talking about this for a long time. And so I'm excited to just bring a wealth of experience and just insight and wisdom to the table tonight. As you know, Inside Voice is really about different perspectives in education and making sure that, while we all have our own perspective and we all have our own lived experience, I want to make sure I always put people in front of you who can share a different experience. And so I want you to walk away with your toolbox filled with many new things, many different things, and you are ready to go out and affect change in your community. So I'm going to just give her a brief introduction by name only, but I'm going to let her tell you who she really is. But welcome to Inside Voice tonight, Judge Nghana Lewis. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Porter, Ms. Jasmine Porter. It's such a blessing to be with you this evening. I am very excited to engage in dialogue, and you're my shero on so many levels. So I'm just so excited to have the opportunity to speak with you and for us to really have a great conversation and talk about the things that are so very important to our communities.
Sure. So you have served in so many different capacities, like I don't know if everybody has done their homework, but she is currently a judge. She has been a practicing attorney, but also an educator. And so I think that's something that many people may know, many people may not know that you are also an educator. So could you speak to us a little bit about just your experience in education, and then we're going to dive into just like that perspective and how that has impacted your activism and your position. Go ahead and just give us a little bit.
Sure, sure. So, my career path is one that it led me to pursue a PhD before I pursued a JD, and in that curriculum, I obtained a PhD in English, and that was my first entry into education. Was as well. You know what? Honestly, it wasn't my first entry into education. While I was studying for the PhD, I taught for Upward Bound. And so that was my first time in the classroom. And so with that experience, I know that experience shaped my approach to my pedagogy, my classroom engagement at the post-secondary level, because Upward Bound is a group of young, hungry, ambitious, and young people who are also really looking for opportunities to explore new things, but who have themselves not necessarily had a great deal of exposure. And so through Upward Bound, I really learned to cultivate and to develop a sense of reciprocity through the learning process. So I'm helping you just like you helping me, and we're gonna learn together. We're gonna figure this out and be bold, and we're gonna not leave any door unopened, not leave any rock unturned. We're going to do this together, and through it all, the goal is to just really to think outside of the box and to expand, right? Just to expand and to have as much knowledge as and information as you can gather in a single classroom session and beyond. So Upward Bound was my foundation, and upon securing the degree, I which was at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. My undergraduate work was done in Louisiana at Tulane. And then I went to Illinois. Upon obtaining that degree, I was very fortunate to be able to return home. My first
Nice.
teaching post was at Louisiana State University in the English department there. And I stayed at LSU for a few years. During that time, I entered into law school, completed the evening program at Loyola University, and obtained my JD, began practicing and teaching. And then I landed what I considered to be my dream job at Tulane University, which was my alma mater. And I've been at Tulane since 2005. I still teach. I still do teach at Tulane, even as I am have been given the great honor of serving as judge for St. John the Baptist Parish Division B. I do still teach. I teach part time. And I couldn't let the classroom go. There's no way. way I could let the classroom go. It's just not happening. So I was able to negotiate that both with the approval of the Supreme Court and Tulane University. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm still in the classroom, still teaching.
What fuels that?
What fuels that?
Yeah, so when you say I can't let it go, I can't let the classroom go, I'd like to know kind of what fuels that and how your practice as in law and as a judge fuels your just that fire to be in front of students.
So there is a very close relationship between the work that a teacher does and the work that a lawyer does. I really never described myself as a lawyer. I was an advocate. I saw myself as an advocate. And, the terms are often used interchangeably, lawyer, advocate. But to be honest, not every person who stands before a group of students in a classroom is a teacher, is an educator.
Talk about
Right?
it.
They may hold that position, but just in terms of your approach, your mentality, your ethics, your purpose, it's not necessarily the case that that's where you're supposed to be. And it's the same for practicing law. If it's not a calling, if you're not called to it, if you're just doing it for the check, then you're not really an advocate. I've always been an advocate. I've always been an educator. And the work of an educator is to advocate for your students. That's the work of an educator. The work of a lawyer is to advocate for your clients. The work of a judge is to advocate for justice. That's what a judge's role is. You have got to be the torchbearer of justice. And so I've changed titles, but in terms of my purpose, my passion, my calling, that hasn't changed. God has just given me a different platform to continue to do that work.
I love it. I'd like to ask your perspective just because, when you start with a program like Upward Bound, which is really, really grassroots, is really boots on the ground. It's really, like impact facing, right? You're talking to, working with hands on the people that you're affecting change for a lot of the time when you're in a program like that. And is very easy to lose sight of that. Even like if you think about being in a school building, when you're a teacher, it's really easy to remember that you're an advocate because you're in front of students every day. Their needs are your present, like circumstance every day. But the further away you get, if you become a principal, if you go to work in a district office, or you go to work for the State Department, it becomes, like you said, it has to be a part of your call because it becomes that boots on the ground mentality becomes more and more obscure the further away you get from the actual people that we're called to impact. So when we're thinking about the community and what you see sitting on that judge's seat, what would you say were a few things that you would like to see more of in your community? Things that you feel like would have that same type of impact, that same grassroots impact that you saw way back in the beginning when you started advocating for kids?
Thank you for the question. In responding to it, I'm going to say that it's not. I have been serving now for 10 months, and I see a lot. There's a
Sure.
lot that I see. Um, Articulating it is not necessarily an easy thing for me to do because I am still working on striking a balance. Okay. If you give me a little time, I want to kind of
Work it out.
elaborate on this. When everything that I learned about the role of a judge um, was always framed in a way that I don't think I fully appreciated or grasped until I started serving.
Mhm.
With respect to a judge's capacity, like expectations, a judge's capacity to actually speak on or to address various things that you bear witness to. Um, and I think what I'm coming to understand is that it's not so much that what that a judge cannot speak on things. It's just more how you do it.
Okay.
And it's also, to be frank with you, I'm in a position now to look around and to start asking questions that need to be asked of the institutionalization of that particular position.
Mm.
Because, as I said just a few minutes ago, I haven't changed. I'm going to continue to advocate. I'm advocating for justice. And if you're advocating for justice, Jasmine, you and I both know very well there's so many injustices in
Sure.
so many institutions and systems that cut across one another and that feed into each other. So, for example, with education, with K-12 education, the boots on the ground with Upward Bound, we're talking about first generation college bound young people who are eligible to enter into that program. And when you learn their stories, when you learn their narratives, their larger stories, those stories are very complicated. Those stories tell of experiences with injustices that are manifold.
Sure.
Okay. And so that doesn't change. The people that you're serving boots on the ground in programs like Upward Bound oftentimes are many of the same people or family members who you're serving in the court. You may be serving them through 4D, so dealing with it on a child support level. You may be serving them based off of a family member being in the criminal justice system as an adult. You may be serving them based off of a family member who was in the juvenile justice system. And to be perfectly frank, you may be serving them because they're in the system.
Yeah.
They were in the system. These are realities that we cannot afford to ignore. And so some of the constraints that I understood judges to be subjected to, I really have had to question, why is that? Why is that we frame judges, this particular position, in the way that we frame it? There's some utility to it in the sense that a judge has to be fair and impartial,
Sure.
but a judge can't be without a heartbeat. You can't lose your humanity if you're going to sit in that seat and serve justice. You have to be human, and you have to recognize other people's humanity.
I
And
love
so
what you
that
have.
requires me, I'm sorry,
Go
you
ahead.
got me going.
Go
That
ahead.
means that I can't ever lose the boots on the ground mentality. I can't.
That's the heart.
Exactly.
That's the heart of what you do. Was something you said a second ago, that made me you were saying, people, the injustices exist. right? Like I would submit that there are no systems that exist that are void of injustice, right? There's just no way to have a justice system. Even the actual justice system has injustices.
Absolutely.
Medical. We're talking about economical systems, educational systems, because they are systems. First of all, because systems depend on each other in order to be able to sustain themselves, but because they're also man-made.
Right.
And there is this thread of oppression or injustice built into all systems. um Knowing that, as a student, as a community member, how do I um continue to do the work that I do every day? Because like you said, the heart of me is always thinking of the mother who just wants to make sure that, kids are taken care of, or the father that's, doing the things that he does every day, or just, regular working people that are living their lives, all the way
Hmm.
from, the kindergarten student to the grandmother. Everybody has their part to play, but we're all impacted by these systems of oppression. We're all impacted by injustices that live in the way that we live. How do we do our everyday diligence, and still advocate for places when we realize, as a fifth grader or as a 50-year-old, when we realize that there is an injustice, what are we to do today? What are we to do? Do we wait until it's on our in our under our roof? Do we wait till it impacts our family? What are we to do today? And I think people are struggling with that. In a lot of ways, people are wondering, you can't not see it, and you can't unsee it, but everybody doesn't know what to do. What's my place? Do I stick my head in the sand and just say, I'm just going to take care of my own family? I can't be concerned with A, B, and C. Or, somebody's crying out and saying, I need help from my community. I need help from my local judge. I need help from the teachers. I need help from the school system. I need help from doctors. I need help.
Hmm.
Um, People are saying, I need help. People are saying, I want to help. But what do we do? What do we do to combat? I guess the question I'm asking is, what do we do to combat these injustices that we see in the midst of just trying to live and live through these injustices that we're living through?
So the first thing I would say that we have to do is we have to pray. Um, and in praying, we have to commit to work. And in your question, it's we have to acknowledge that it is not easy, but that's where prayer comes in, because you're able through that, to through developing a relationship. And it may, for some, it may not be prayer, it may be meditation. You have to be able to just be silent and acknowledge the difficulties, the challenges, the stresses, the feelings of being defeated. You have to acknowledge it, because it is real. When we talk about mental health, for example, which is so under the importance of being well mentally is so underemphasized in our community, in our society. There's so little significance placed on it, but it's important. You have to be able to be still and to allow it, the reality of what you're experiencing, what we're all experiencing. Right now in St. John the Baptist Parish, looking around, I'm looking and I'm seeing all these tarps, and I'm seeing, all of the evidence of disaster. It's real. So you have to acknowledge it. That's a mass thing, right? Everybody's experiencing that. But, as you said, in speaking to the mother who might be working two jobs and just can't is trying to make ends meet and doesn't know when she's gonna catch a break. Sister, you got to stop and acknowledge it and recognize the challenge and know and know in that recognition, in that moment of acknowledgement, in that recognition that there's work to be done and the work can be done. So, how do we do the work? We have to build networks in that regard. We have to be able to say, okay, I can't do it all alone myself, by myself. I have to be able to recognize my limitations, my capacities, and my limitations. I write these down. For many people, that may not work. You know, the mental notes may be enough to say, okay, this is what I'm capable of. This is what I'm not capable of. I actually write things down. But this. I think I can do this. This. I can't do that. I need help with that. You know that I've leaned on you for in areas where I just in feeling and acknowledging what your limits are, leaning on those who can help you financially. Be, resources are not easy to come by.
Sure.
Through a parish in St. John the Baptist Parish in particular, I know that we have challenges around the availability of services and resources. And so, you know what? You may have to look next door. You may have to go on the internet if that's a vehicle that's available to you, and just Google the need, and then match it to Louisiana and see what comes up. You may have to go state level. Whatever it is, know though that there is some resource somewhere that is available. Um, Feeling capable, feeling like you are capable of building those networks is often a challenge, especially for people who are resource deprived, resource limited. That's often a challenge. But that's why I say you have to start by acknowledging it. You just have to acknowledge that you're struggling,
Yeah.
and pray or meditate, and then commit to work. You just have to make that commitment that you're going to do what you can within your means to develop the capacity.
I think that prayer part is super important, and it aligns to what you mentioned about your call, right? And how your title may change, however, you're still advocating for, because that's what you were created to do. You know, like that's your calling. Um and so I just want to, the teacher in me would be remiss if I didn't say in this moment that many times the resources that the reason why it's important to pray is that many times the resources and the opportunities that we can't find around us are not there because our call is to create them. And our job is to not to, is to find a way to create what it is that's missing, to become what it is that's missing. Like the Christ we serve says, I am that I am, right? And so
Yes.
if we're following his footsteps, we are to become something, whatever it is that we're supposed to be. And so I want to say out, I just want to name that out loud. I thought that was really powerful that you said, maybe we have to go here, maybe we have to go there, maybe we have to lean on other people. That's so important. But that prayer piece sometimes reminds us that you are the answer.
That's right.
And
Amen.
we
That's
have
true.
that's the work, the commit to work part. My dog is
I hear.
co-signing
I hear.
the commit to work part is about becoming something, and sometimes it's just sharing a story, just being a ear to listen, providing a meal, whatever the case may be. I mean, there are opportunities for us to become something. In the same way we reach out and we need things, we can also become something for
And that
someone.
becomes too, building on that idea, that becomes oftentimes the mechanism through which you develop the networks, right? Because you're becoming, and you're becoming for someone else who has that need, who may not have your capacity, but who can lean on you. And then invariably you start to build networks in that manner. So yeah, absolutely. And you build confidence, and you strengthen
Absolutely.
in moments where, we know that we are struggling.
So I have to put on here about this. When I think about Black people, Indigenous people, people of color in the education system, we recognize that systems of oppression are real. School to prison pipeline is real. Those things that that children of color, Black people and people of color are combating in the school system are real things. Um, from your perspective, what do we need? What if we were talking to allies, if we were talking to, people that were ready to do the commit to work part. We have prayed, we know we're supposed to, we're looking for what our angle is, where are we gonna serve, where are we gonna become what it is that we're supposed to become. What do our young people need? What do they need right now?
Short term,
Both.
short term and long term. Short term. Okay, so I'm gonna just keep it real. We need to we need to so let me say this. I sometimes speak on things of which I don't have the evidence to back it up. Okay, what you just spoke to regarding school to prison pipeline, it's a dynamic that we know exists, and we know that the evidence is there. But what I sometimes struggle with is when we speak in a language that is not accessible to the very people that we are trying to work with and build capacity
Sure.
with. Um, so I guess the first thing that we need is a language. We need a language that we can share. Um, you and I are educators. We go hard. We go deep. Um, I, I I will be the first to admit that it is sometimes a challenge for me to speak to and to relate to my child, my own child, my 16-year-old child, because it's a different language. It's a language that there's often barriers. So I know what she needs. I know what's best for her in terms of her long-term development and growth. But the way that I package that is not necessarily going to translate for her if it's falling on deaf ears. I don't think it's any different when we're talking about these systemic issues that we know our community faces. We know that our community faces these issues because, as I said, we know the data. We got the data. We have the information. We're working in this system and we see it. Just like you said, we see it and then we can quantify it. But how then do we translate that to the very people who are most impacted adversely by these systems of oppression and injustice? That is not easy. That is not easy work. So for me, the first thing is a language. And it's no different, Jasmine. So in terms of K-12 education, because there's such a nexus between the K-12 educational system and the system that I work in at the juvenile level as well as at the adult level, it's the same thing. Speaking, developing a language, a vocabulary that is not condescending, that is not insulting, berating, that doesn't sound that way to the young people that we're trying to reach and to encourage to invest in their educations. That is not easy because what sounds like encouragement, uplift to me may not sound the same, may not be translating that way. So the first thing I would say we need as a community collectively is a language that can foster and sustain open dialogue and understanding across generations and across experiences and educational levels. The second thing that we need is leadership. We need leadership. We need bold leadership. We don't need to be complacent. We don't need to be comfortable. We need leaders who are very uncomfortable and leaders uh, uh, who are comfortable being uncomfortable. Um, and we don't have that.
Mm-mm.
We don't have that in
Mm-mm.
abundance.
We have a lot of
Uh,
followers, and everybody's looking to get followers,
and we have a lot of complacency
and we have a
and,
lot of comfort.
comfort, and we have a lot of just talkers, right? Like, okay,
Yep,
and we have a lot of finger pointers, like the parents need to do this and you need to do that, and you're the leader over here. And um, we need some bold, uncomfortable, visionary people who are going to do the work, who are committed to doing the work, and who are going to do the work. Individual leaders are great, but then what you're going to end up with is an individual leader whose mental health cannot be
that's
sustained, whose physical health cannot be sustained, and they're going to die. I mean, let's just keep it real.
that's true.
Let's just keep it real. So we need a language, we need leadership, and we need a plan. Like we've got to have a vision. We can't keep talking about what we already know. We got the data. We can't keep talking about it. We already know that there's the injustices, as you said. At some point, talk becomes nothing but that, just talk. We have to commit to action, and we have to have a plan. We have to plan for the change that we want to see in these various systems, because systems don't change overnight. Systems get broken,
No,
the injustices build over hundreds of years, decades, long time frames. It's not going to be undone overnight, but it's certainly not going to be undone if you don't have a plan.
no. And then we don't start taking steps towards what we're saying it should look like. Do you think there is a world? Do you think there is a circumstance, looking at where we are right now, I, it would be very difficult for me to imagine anybody in life whose paradigm didn't shift with the COVID, with the pandemic. It would be very difficult for me to understand. Um, I mean, people are saying they want to go back to normal, or go back to normal, but just the idea that nobody could have told me the whole world would have been stuck inside and shut down, right? That actually happened. I can't unknow that. Now I know that we could all be shut down in a room for months at a time. Um, and that could be our reality for whatever reason. Um, so is there a world where, you know, there are other shifts, and that was negative. It was hard to swallow. We were all missing outside and all those things. Is there a world where there is a shift like that? A paradigm shift, um, that leans in the direction of what's best for humanity, that leans in the direction of correcting um, years of intentional systemic oppression for um, women of color, for people of color, for women in general, for poor people, for like marginal everybody. Is there a world that leans in the direction of what's best for humanity?
Because I believe in God, and because I believe God is good, and that we're all created in God's image, yes, I do believe that there is that world. I believe that that world, I mean, I don't want this to sound crazy, but like I believe it exists inside of me, inside of you, inside of those who have vision, who commit to work, who engage in these dialogues, and who move beyond, who pray, who move from prayer to work, and who are purposeful in their work. So I believe it exists, it manifests in how we live each day. Where I think I hear your question going is there a world, such a world where that is the norm, like where that's just with everybody?
I'm asking you because you understand the law. So I guess my question is there a world where that's the law? Well, that's the policy. That is the norm. We've normed it in a way that says, here's what the expectation is. And not only do we expect it, but we're gonna in the same way we intentionally created systems to marginalize people, we're gonna intentionally correct it and enforce it. Does that exist? Are people willing to get that uncomfortable? Because there are people who benefit greatly from the way things are right now.
They benefit greatly because from the way things are right now, because of the lack of emphasis that we place on education and on understanding, and so it wasn't by accident that the school to prison pipeline um,
Yeah,
exists. It's not by accident that you had during slavery the laws that prohibited reading.
right,
That's not accidental. That's human beings who were writing down laws to do certain work, right?
right.
I believe that the capacity to facilitate change, again, lies in us, and fundamentally lies in our ability to develop that language that resonates with young people, such that education, acquiring the knowledge and the skill set and then acting on the knowledge, becomes the most important thing.
Yeah,
That's more important than anything else. And I'm gonna even say this, like in terms of how that knowledge is acquired, I've become much more open to the idea that technology has a role to play in that, because I was really kind of I'm an old school, give me a book that I can
yeah,
hold in my hands. But now I see that, there's a role for technology to play in that. And I see it in part because of movements that we have been able to witness. You alluded to COVID. One of the things that COVID did by forcing us inside was to um, it kind of forced us inside, but then it also forced us outside in terms of the movements that flowed from the tragic murder of George Floyd. Now, the interesting thing about that movement is that it should have served for you and I. It served as a reminder of the longer history of movement around social justice and in pushing against systemic inequality and systematic murder, right, of Black people. Um, I I was less shocked by the movement because we've seen it, we know it, and I was kind of more impressed by how many young people for this particular movement. We had the freedom fighters of the civil rights movement, but for this particular movement, it was really young people, and it was a really integrated movement.
yeah,
Because that's another thing that has to occur. You've got to have young people because they can fight for the long haul, and you have to have young people across the spectrum, um, because that's how you sustain it. You're able to sustain it over the long haul. Going back to the point about it takes a long time to undo systems of oppression. It's going to take a while for us to actually see the change that we envision and that we desire uh, in systemic oppression. It's going to take a while. We may not see it in our lifetime, but for believing that it will happen, I absolutely believe that. Because
yeah.
it's over time, Jasmine. That's the thing. In being very cognizant of the backlash and the pushback, because you're going to always have that. What we can never afford to do is to become complacent. I'm going back to it. You got to
Yeah.
always be a little bit uncomfortable. You have to. You
Well,
have
that's
to.
that's a good point. Why are people so uncomfortable with because you said we've got to be educated. And that movement with young people, I had a fear of um it's with Philando Castile and like all of these murders that were happening. I'm using his name, but there were just several murders that were happening back on the heels of each other, even before COVID. And
Mm-hmm.
my concern was always people are gonna get numb to this. But what also came alongside just seeing that brutal, like it was really happening and we couldn't escape it. What
Mm-hmm.
also came was the understanding of why this was being tolerated. So it was like there was this, we were being inundated with these murders, but also inundated with this, like you said, this history, this educational history moment that was people were like, wait a minute, this is, and all of a sudden, names that, other names besides the names that we were familiar with on during Black History Month started to come up, and people started to realize that this was something that had happened over and over and over again throughout history. We could just see it now.
Right.
And so I'm painting this picture, I'm prefacing it with these things because um you're right that complacent, the potential for us to become complacent really stirred me for a while. It was just like I don't want people to feel like this is okay or like this is just something we're just going to see from now on.
Mm-hmm.
But they were educated at the same time that they were knowing that these things were happening. And now, on the heels of people really pushing back against um critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching, and people is really just teaching history from a sincere and authentic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
um do you think that's why people are pushing back, because they want, that complacency is a key component? I mean, I'm begging the question.
Weaponization
Yes.
is a key component. That I'll say this, like, so, going back to the point I made about technology earlier, I could say the same for like the media. The media is very powerful, and I think if young people could be taught literacy around media, it's a tool. That's all it is a tool, and it has there's these like um, waves whereby the media has been used um, and deployed to actually facilitate some of the change that you and I are describing and talking about
Right.
during the civil rights movement. Television served a very important role
Right.
in showing what was happening to
Black people.
to black people, and especially to black and black women and men in the South, right? And so media served a very useful purpose. The purpose that it's serving right now is the same purpose. Is to weaponize, though. Like, that's the thing. It's serving the same purpose as spotlighting it, but it's weaponizing and it's distorting. And so the
Okay.
key for us is we have to be able to say, oh, okay, look at what this industry that is owned by like a handful, that's the other thing, like Fox, CNN, all your mainstream, they all own pretty much by the same companies. They've figured out how to entertain and to weaponize, or to allow it to be used as weapon. Um, I say all of this to say not to indict the media, but rather to say that our capacity around recognizing and seeing it for what it is. The attack on critical race theory, all you've done is just substituted, right? First, it was Kaepernick, and I'm talking within the short history. First, it was Kaepernick kneeling as an assault to your existence and to your narrative around what America is. And now it's CRT, which, we know CRT. It originated in a framework that most K-12 institutions would never see, because it originated in a legal framework. It's in
Right.
the it's it within the context of the law.
Right.
That's where it originated. I like the fact, I think it's very good that it has now become a tool that educators have available to them to educate. But I'll say this too, Jasmine, it shouldn't be the only tool. Like if there's any critique to be leveled against critical race theory or any theory, it is that it should not be, if we're seeking to empower and to educate young people with knowledge,
Come on.
let's give them the full spectrum of the various lenses through which you can process and understand. And then you have to make up your mind where you're going to situate yourself, how you're going to situate yourself, and work accordingly. But again, the question that you asked about, and I kind of got somewhat off the tangent, on the tangent, essentially is that these concepts, these ideas that are now under attack, it's nothing but the changing same. And it's the old guard, it's the just call it the old guard,
Yeah.
wanting, feeling, and recognizing that their capacity to use this weapon is
It's
no
not
longer
working.
going to work. It's no longer going to work.
No.
Oh, Kaepernick got everybody in the NFL, and the NFL now is changing, and the NFL is doing what? But here's the thing: we can never, this whole notion of complacency and just kind of letting information come to you and not really being critically engaged with the information. That's the real danger. That's the real danger. The media cannot hurt you. Those who are opposing and weaponizing critical race theory, those people really cannot hurt you unless you are complacent and unless you are not critically engaged and prepared to respond to it.
I think you hit on something powerful, and how important it is for education to teach, particularly K-12. I don't remember feeling empowered to think from, I'm not at home. I remember my mother would tell me all the time, you better not stop thinking. You can't never stop thinking. Jasmine, you're not thinking about this. And that stuck with me forever. I
Mm-hmm.
can't not think. And you said something powerful. I don't remember being able to think critically about anything that I read until I got to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I read a lot. We read a
Mm-hmm.
lot. There was a lot of text that we were pulling on,
Yeah.
but I was never able to think critically about any of it. We live in St. John the Baptist. I used to live in St. John the Baptist Parish.
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco plantation was a common field trip. And I
Wow.
remember it was a common field trip. I remember going in the fourth grade as clear as day. And the reason why I remember is because I went home and I told my father. Now this is in my backyard, literally. Told my father that I went on a field trip to a beautiful house. And it had all, and I remember it never dawned on me what actually happened at San Francisco Plantation. I had a
Mm-hmm.
whole day's field trip there. And not until I got home and my dad was like, do you know where you were? Do you remember those houses? And I'm coming talking about the curtains and the lavish dishes and the
Yeah.
tables and the flooring and the architecture.
Yeah.
Because I'm a nerd and I'm listening, I'm soaking in everything that they're telling me on this field trip,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm still not thinking. And thank God I had people in my life who reminded me to be prayerful and to be thoughtful, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that education being a conduit for clear, independent thought, right? Like you can think for yourself, you can make decisions for yourself. Nothing, there's not a prayer in the world that eliminates the need for you to be able to make clear decisions and commit to the work that needs to be done.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is missing from K to 12 education. And you're right. We do a lot of this is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this
Yeah.
must be the answer. Well, this must be the answer. And then wanting to just force feed whatever the new this is. Like you said, the change of guard. No, this is going to be, this doesn't work anymore. Let's try this. And we're going to combat it with this. Well, this didn't work. And there's this endless cycle of really just oppressive practice.
Hmm.
that keeps people, like you said, complacent, keeps people from thinking um, clearly and being thoughtful about their next move. What would you say? What would you say? There, I don't believe there's a magic wand that you wave over any group of students that works for everybody. We're people. There's different things, but what
Right.
would you what would you say we need to to create, you know, I think there's a balance. So let me be clear about my position, right? Like there's a balance. I don't believe in just completely free thinking and do what feels best for you because we're too connected for that. And
Hmm.
so all of our decisions impact other people. So I think that there's a balance between, making good decisions for yourself and also for the collective. Um, how do we get student, because I remember thinking as a classroom teacher that helping my kids to be critical thinkers as an English teacher, and we get to read books all day. That should be the place where they're doing the most critical thinking. And I remember thinking to myself, the hardest thing to teach I could teach you vocabulary, I could teach you grammar, I can even teach you spelling, but it is so hard to teach you to think. How in the world do we embrace equitable practice, which is like rigorous curriculum and best practices in teaching? How do we embrace those things and also give our students room to become um decision makers, problem solvers, thoughtful people?
Yeah. So, if, when I'm not sure how long ago this was. I'm about to be 50, Jasmine, so my mind is not right on
Don't start
point
telling them,
anymore. You know what? I think it was the year that I moved from LSU to Tulane. I launched a not for profit organization called the Essence Program. And the theory behind Essence was an acronym for Encouraging Student Scholarship and Excellence Through Native Centered Education. Um, Jan, I can't think of it's Janet was her first name. I can't think of her last name. She's an educate. She is a uh, ed policy. Um,
Here, I mean, in Louisiana.
she was out of Atlanta at the time that I was forming Essence, and she was kind of in that cohort with Lisa Delpit, and Lisa's Louisiana born.
Hmm.
I can't think of Janet's last name, but Janet um, theorized. She was one of the early Gloria Lasson Billings, like of that kind
Hmm.
of that school of thought. Her um, addition to the literature, building on Carter G. Woodson, was to argue that young people needed, especially children of color, Black children, needed to actually be able to match the standards, the curriculum that's adopted by the institution, match it with content that had a kind of Afrocentric approach. So that homebound and cutting it across the curriculum. So building on her theoretical framework, I riffed off of that. And in launching Essence for a couple of years, myself and good friend of mine, we ran a program that developed curriculum for K-12 institutions, and it was focused on local content. Okay, so it's not. So in other words, it's not a innovative way of approaching education. It's been tested and proven that when children see themselves and what they're learning and what you're expecting them to learn by way of what the institutions have adopted, right, as the content that you need to have, and here's the method that by which it has to be delivered, or this is the pedagogy that we're most invested in. Because I do believe that education in terms of teachers have to be free and feel free to innovate in terms of pedagogy. But then there also has to be some latitude, some room for integrating the local, because
Yes.
that's what enables kids to actually really see themselves. A child may not, a child may relate to the people will fly.
That's right.
They may relate to that, but they're gonna really relate to um, I'm trying to think of something I could point to in St. John the Baptist Parish.
Sugar cane. There's a whole unit on sugar cane.
Yeah, sugar canes. They're gonna really relate to that. And I would venture to say even they're going to relate to San Francisco Plantation in the sense that it is a place. It is a structure that they may pass every day and see and not know the history of. So they've seen it. But just seizing upon that place as a site for educating young people and investing them in learning across the curriculum, right? So the geographical components, the historical components, economics, labor. It would have to be age appropriate, of course, but
Sure.
you can approach it from every curricular perspective. Injustice,
Sure.
injustice, change, investment. What is my community? How has my community invested in this place, San Francisco Plantation? What are taxpayer dollars going to that? Are my taxpayer dollars going to my parents' taxpayer dollars going to that? And if so, what am I getting back for it? What's the narrative that's being told at this place? That's how you develop critical thinking
That's right.
around your location. And it is also the way that you situate yourself to begin not only to scaffold in terms of content, what has to be learned, because I'm about to be tested on this. Let's not talk about the testing, right?
Let's not.
This
Let's not.
conversation for another day. Um, but you become critically engaged. And then I'll say too, which is another piece for the work that has to be done. You also, I think, invest kids in their communities in a way that is absolutely necessary if they are to become the leaders of tomorrow, right? If we're going to build their leadership skills, build and really encourage them to think about what's possible, then they're not only learning from multiple disciplinary perspectives with local as foundation, they are also investing,
Yeah.
right, in their local,
Yeah.
their communities.
That's powerful. The critical thinking begins with how if I can figure out how this really impacts me and why it's important for me to think this all the way through. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be thinking about it, whether I'm in kindergarten or whether I'm in 12th grade. I'm going to be
Right.
thinking about it if it's important to me and my family.
That's right.
What this has been good. I could do this for a whole nother hour, but I want you to leave us with something, and again, I think what's important is two things about you in particular is your experience and your perspective. Because that's what creates your perspective. It's just this unique experience that you have. Um, there are parents watching right now and who will come back and watch later, for the most part, and educators. There's not a lot of students that tune in, but parents and educators, a lot of times are giving me feedback about Inside Voice. And so, as a parent and an educator, um, what's the one thing you want me to put in my toolbox? What's the, like, I can't build a house without a hammer. I used to say that to my kids all the time when they asked me for a pencil. Well, why would you come to school without a pencil? You can't build a house without a hammer. So not in a condescending way, but just like in a joking way, like here's your hammer,
Mm-hmm.
gotta build your
Mm-hmm.
house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's my hammer? What's the thing that I need to be pulling on? What is the thing that you want me to put in my toolbox I want to get up in the morning when I get out here and I am, it may not be my call, but I think we all have a little bit of advocacy in us. We all have a part to play in that. When we talked about civil rights, that movement was about young people fueled and empowered by grown visionaries, right?
Mhm.
Like they had leaders, they had visionaries, and they felt empowered to become a part of the movement. I just watched the Aretha movie recently, and I wondered how many she was begging her father to be a part of the movement.
Mhm.
And I wonder how many kids, young people I know that would be begging. It's so easy to be a part of it now. You wouldn't even have to ask. You can, hop online and be a part of the movement.
Yeah.
Um, so there are people who can be empowered to do, to become, to act, to commit, to come out of complacency, to be catalyzed into something. And there's so many places now that we can put our hands to the plow, be impactful, in the kingdom. You know what I mean? Like in a positive way, in a way that is just, we talk about being the eye and the hand, and that we're all a part of the same body. What is it that I need to take with me every day? What is it that I need to put in my toolbox as I'm leaving Inside Voice tonight? What do you want us to take with us every day?
Okay, so you may not like this. I'm gonna have to ask you: is mental health in your toolbox?
Mental health is it's I think it has to do with that language that you talked about earlier, and us not having a way to communicate when we're struggling with mental health.
Let me tell you why I want mental health in the toolbox. Because when we hear those two words, mental health, we tend to think like we tend to go to a negative, an imbalance. And but yet I want to take it back to education, and I'm gonna do it in a way that is gonna immediately resonate with our audience. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. Who's that the model for? That's the model for the um, United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. The mind in that context is the tool that facilitates learning, education, a commitment, right? Commitment. So the United Negro College Fund was on it. The mental, your mind, right? We're talking about the mind when we're talking about critical thinking, the
Right.
capacity to expand. That's got to be healthy. We're talking about the mind when we say you can't be complacent.
That's right.
It's got to be healthy. I open by saying, and you're asking me about challenges and the difficulties. And I said, first thing you got to do is you got to acknowledge it. You got to recognize it. That requires you to let this thing here be still, be still, and to get into a place where you can actually breathe and find the peace that then empowers you to act, to recognize, to work, to commit. But you got to have it's got to be healthy. And I'm not speaking in terms of necessarily in terms of disorder, because that's another aspect of it too that we
Sure.
have to be real about. Jasmine, the nexus between mental health disorder and
Yes.
education, especially for our young people. So I want in our toolbox, I want it in the toolbox. I really want us to rethink and to kind of reposition ourselves as a community vis-a-vis the concept of mental health.
Mm.
Because if our mind is healthy, then we really are at a great place to begin critically thinking about the work that we can do, that we must do to move forward.
Well, I'm going to close with this, woman of God, because what you made me think about when you said mental health was Proverbs 4:7, that says wisdom is the principal thing. And then God says, so get that. So get wisdom,
Yes,
and in all thy getting, get understanding.
that's
And
right.
so that's what we're talking about tonight. It's about the principle, the most important thing. The first thing you need to be is wise. And being wise is about everything that you talked about tonight. It's about coming out of complacency. It's about seeing yourself as a conduit. It's about seeing yourself as a change agent. Um, being wise is about recognizing what your agency and your call is, and where you put your hand to the plow. It's about seeing yourself in curriculum, and wouldn't it be powerful if critical race theory and people were teaching, skewed history for the rest of life, and we raised kids who could say, but what does that have to do with me? Or
Right.
I read somewhere that such and so forth. I would love for my kid to be the kid in the classroom who's like, I don't know about Christopher Columbus, this Christopher Columbus that you talk about, because my mama said, with
Yeah.
Cardi B mean with her hand on her hip. Like,
Yes.
I want my kid to be the kid in the classroom challenging and thinking for themselves. And I think what's important today is that you know that we continue to push the agenda of agency, power. Listen, I'm thinking I'm going to push you now to write language, leadership, and a plan, because that sounds like a book title to me.
Well,
Somebody
we
needs
we
to.
could have three L's: language, leadership, and legacy.
That's
Because
listen.
what's your
What
legacy gonna
what
be?
what is?
Got to have a plan.
Can you write the book, please?
You gonna write the book. We're gonna write it together. How about
Let's
that?
let's write the book. Language, leadership, and
And
legacy
legacy.
coming soon. This has been a joy. I have not planned the next Inside Voice yet. To be completely transparent, I don't know. This is completely led by God. I'm just gonna be prayerful and say, God, who do you want me to talk to next? So I'm so grateful that He placed you in my spirit. I'm so grateful that you shared from your call. You know,
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you for the
thank you,
opportunity.
Miss Mary. I like the three L's too. We gonna write the book.
Who's that?
Mary Numa says, I like that, the three L's.
Oh yeah, leadership, language, leadership, and legacy. That's right. We're gonna write that book together,
We're gonna write the
and I'm
book.
gonna hold you to that,
I'm
Miss
telling
Porter.
you. Speaking of which, I'm ready to push out again. I've started pre-sales last year around Thanksgiving, but pre-sales are over. It's ready for sale. The ebook, I don't have a print version. I'm just selling the ebook. It's a teacher's devotional called The Teacher's Lounge, and it is a
Awesome.
monthly devotional. It'll be I'm gonna put it on my website, and I'll share it via my social media platforms. But if you know a teacher or an educator who needs to have a guide for a quiet moment, the Teacher's Lounge is just a year-long devotional. It also has like recipes for like comforting foods and detoxes, and just stuff that teachers need throughout the year to give them a little bit of wind in their sails, a little bit of fresh wind. And so if you know a teacher, an educator who would benefit from just a quiet moment with God, the book is completely breathed by the Spirit of God. And I can't wait to share it with
That's gonna be
everyone.
my Christmas gift. I'm gonna adopt
That's
that for my Christmas gift for my people.
Please.
Yes.
It'll be on my social media platforms. It's called The Teacher's Lounge. It'll be on my site and on my social media platform. But uh if I don't know if you want to share, is there anything that you need to share that's coming up? Is there any way any place that you feel like people can reach out to advocate and to put their dollars behind, put their volunteer time behind? Absolutely. In St. John the Baptist Parish right now, we can use as many volunteers going in that direction as we possibly can. If you know people who gut houses, if you know people who can tarp roofs, if you know people who can clear debris and dispose of debris, those are all things. If you know people that can have a meal prepared for people who are struggling in their homes and trying to gut their houses, and they just need a meal, any
I'm a,
volunteer.
yeah, and I'll just shout out the leadership of our parish in terms of seeing a lot of boots on the ground, as you said, a lot of hardworking people who are coordinating, organizing our council people, our parish president. I'll say this: like sometimes people get bad raps because they're not seen on this day at this time in the community. But I'm going to shout out our leadership, for all of the differences of opinion that can often arise amongst leaders. Um, for the most part, our leadership has come together, and I'll shout out our Chief Justice Weimer, who's come to our parish on a number of occasions. She's basically made the rounds. We don't, we really don't see how involved and engaged these leaders have been and are. Not only because we're in a moment of crisis, but we are in fact a community. Now, I'll leave it at that. We're a community. We are struggling, but we are working, and I just got to give some credit to that because I see it. I really do see it, and I'm not about to give credit where it's not deserved.
No.
I'm not gonna do that.
I'm adding on to that coattail the council women as well, council men and women who have been out just
Thank
again
you.
digging it out of the mud, like rolling their sleeves up and really helping people. Thank you to everybody who is supporting St. John the Baptist Parish. If you are able to, or you know someone who is able to send support and help, like we said, in the form of meals or just hammers and nails, that we could all use some help there
Yes.
right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Nagana,
My
I
letter
am
coming up.
listen. Is Queen in the house?
Queen
Because
is Queen is cutting up. Queen
okay,
Queen says
good.
she ready to go outside, and it's after 7 o'clock. Okay, so that's Queen.
Put Queen on a leash because I don't want to see Queen on the milk carton again. We all around here praying for Queen's deliverance to get back
I
home.
don't know if you hear Queen. Queen says 7 o'clock. Get off
Oh
that
my
computer
gosh. Please
and
take
come
Queen out
feed
and
me.
hold on tight to her so we
All
don't lose her.
right. I love you,
I
Jasmine.
love you more. Y'all take care. Thank you so much for joining us on Inside Voice. We'll see y'all next time.